Hi, my name is Nikki, founder of Wellish, and today we're going to review some really exciting scientific research. Stanford University scientists shared is that humans age in accelerated bursts, one in their mid-40s and another in their early 60s. And this is pretty counter to some of the general thinking that on every birthday you get just a little bit older. Here are some of the headlines that came out this week. They're pretty eye-catching, especially depending on what your age might be. Myself getting close to my mid-40s has definitely caught my attention. One of the things we're going to do first before going into the conclusions is just reviewing a few basic trust stats of this research, which is really important that you can be able to do for any type of research you come across, especially in the health and wellness space. So 3 key questions to ask yourself. 1, what's the journal? 2, who are the scientists? And 3, what is the study design like? So those 3 questions can give you a really basic foundation for whether or not you should listen to the research conclusions. So let's take a look at how that applies here. So first off, for what's the journal? You can see here that the journal is Nature Aging, which is part of the umbrella of Nature Publications, which is a highly selective journal. So, given that this is already an overall a source that you could trust. Then the second piece to ask yourself is, who are the scientists? They have been doing work at Stanford Medicine. And in addition to that, you can take a look at their past publications and in terms of the volume of their peer-reviewed work in the past, as well as the number of times that their previous work has been cited by others, which typically means that if there's a high number of citations, that their work is at least more higher quality that other folks are mentioning as well. The other thing to keep in mind is just for any disclosures around conflicts of interest. So either that the research, has been funded by a certain source, or that the scientists have affiliations with other groups. And no such thing here, so that's something positive. Now let's go into the study design. So what you'll see here, the first thing that they call out is that they studied 108 participants. This is where one of my red flags goes off because this is a fairly small number, especially when you think about the types of characteristics that they're cutting this pool down with. So by characteristics, I mean things like age. So they're looking at age ranges from 25 to 75. In addition to that, they are looking at male and female, and they roughly have a 50% split there. And they also go on to mention diverse ethnic backgrounds as well. So when you think about 108 divided by different age buckets and diverse ethnic backgrounds, you can start to see a picture emerging that the broadness of some of the conclusions they can make will be a bit more limited. But this is still valuable from a directional standpoint and to be able to inform future research, which is really important. The other thing they do mention in this study is that there's alternate research study that was done at Stanford University back in 2019, covering the same topic of aging. And in that study, they primarily were using protein samples in the blood, as opposed to the much more diverse set of data samples here, blood, stool, skin. And that study covered over 4,200 participants, which is a much more robust size. And they came up with very similar results in terms of rapid aging in certain time points. So that's important to keep in mind when evaluating this research as well. One other piece of the study design to talk about is that they focused on healthy people as defined by prior to onset of any disease, whether that's cardiovascular disease, insulin resistance. And the reason why that's important in particular is that they're able to start to tease apart the biomolecular changes that might be happening that's independent of any kind of disease onset. So you get a more truer picture of what might be happening with aging as opposed to what happens with disease onset. So that's one positive that they're trying to do. One of the limitations here, though, is that they evaluated disease status only at recruitment, so at the start of the study, as opposed to throughout. So that is a limitation of some of their work. One of the other limitations that does come up is that they collected a variety of different biological samples to inform some of the clustering work that they did and the conclusions, but they did not capture behavioral data. So, for example, one of the things that we'll talk about in a second is around alcohol metabolism. They didn't necessarily look at if folks in the study were consuming more or less alcohol over the duration of the study. Now let's go ahead and talk about some of the conclusion. One thing to keep in mind is that there's some biomolecular changes that are pretty consistent across the two waves of aging, so in the mid 40s and the early 60s. So there's some consistent changes that are happening in both those waves, specifically biomolecular changes in the skin and muscle, cardiovascular disease, and caffeine metabolism. So that seems to cross both waves. Then there's some unique things that are happening in the mid 40s wave versus the early 60s wave. So some of the unique stuff that's happening in the mid 40s are related to alcohol metabolism and also lipid metabolism. And then in the early 60s, some of the unique things that are happening are carbohydrate metabolism, immune function, and kidney function. So what does that mean, and what should you take away from that? So once again, this research is more directional and gives you the ability to sort of reflect and think about some of the changes that are happening in your own body. Things that you might want to keep in mind for the group in particular nearing their mid 40s is reevaluate sort of how you're feeling in terms of your ability to process alcohol, right? And then also in terms of lipid metabolism, have a really open conversation with your doctor about what your lipid profile currently looks like and where do you want it to be as you're getting into this next stage. Finally, I'll leave you with this quote from senior researcher of this article. And what Michael is calling out here is just being a big believer in adjusting our lifestyles while we're still healthy, which is something we at Wellish strongly believe. Thank you so much.